Season 1 gets a level 2 rating, and honestly, this makes sense when you think about the context. We're being introduced to Dexter for the first time, learning about Harry's code, understanding why he does what he does. The show is working overtime to make us sympathize with him and see him as someone dealing with dark urges in the most controlled way possible. Throughout this season, Dexter is pretty much sticking to the code religiously. He's targeting people who genuinely deserve it based on the rules his father set up. We're talking murderers, predators, people who the justice system failed to stop. The ice truck killer storyline is personal, sure, but Dexter's not really going off the rails here. He's methodical, careful, and still presenting himself as someone trying to channel something terrible into something that could be seen as productive, even if it's twisted. The reason this isn't level 1 is because Dexter does make some questionable choices that show his selfishness. He's manipulating everyone around him, lying constantly, and there are moments where you can see him prioritizing his own needs over doing what's actually right. The whole situation with Rudy and his sister gets messy, and while Dexter ultimately makes the right choice, you can see him wrestling with it in a way that's not entirely heroic. He's not at his worst here, but he's definitely not at his most justified either. Solid level 2, because we're seeing the foundation of his darkness while still being in that maybe he's not so bad phase. Season 2 bumps up to level 3, and this is where we start seeing Dexter make decisions that are harder to defend. The bodies are being discovered, the Bay Harbor butcher investigation is heating up, and Dexter is spiraling. When the pressure's on, we get to see what he's really about. What pushes this season higher on the evil scale is how Dexter starts bending and breaking his own code to protect himself. He's willing to let innocent people take the fall for his crimes. Dokes becomes his scapegoat, and while Dexter doesn't directly kill him, he absolutely creates the circumstances that lead to Dokes' death. That's a massive line to cross. Dokes was a good guy, a cop trying to stop a serial killer, and Dexter essentially orchestrates his demise to save himself. Beyond that, we see Dexter being incredibly selfish throughout the season. He's more concerned with self-preservation than actually following any moral code. The murders he commits this season feel less about justice and more about covering his tracks and feeding his compulsion. Lila is manipulated and eventually killed, and while she was unhinged, the way Dexter handles that entire situation shows how willing he is to dispose of people who become inconvenient to him. Season 3 actually drops down to level 1, which might surprise some people, but hear me out. This is probably Dexter at his most heroic, if we can even use that word. The main storyline with Miguel Prado starts off with Dexter genuinely trying to connect with someone and share his reality. There's almost something innocent about it, even though obviously nothing about murder is innocent. For most of the season, Dexter is back to following the code pretty strictly. He's taking out bad guys, he's being careful, and he's actually trying to maintain his humanity through his relationship with Miguel. Yeah, it goes wrong, but the intent is notable. When Miguel starts abusing their friendship and killing people who don't fit the code, Dexter recognizes that this is wrong and takes action to stop it. That's significant. He's enforcing the rules his father gave him and actually showing that he has boundaries. The reason this is level 1 is because relative to other seasons, Dexter shows more restraint and more genuine attempts at being something other than purely evil. He's trying to be a good brother, a good boyfriend to Rita, and even a good father figure to her kids. His kills this season are mostly justified by his code, and when he does have to kill Miguel, it's genuinely because Miguel has become dangerous and violated the principles Dexter holds important. This is about as good as Dexter gets, which is why it earns the lowest evil rating. Season 4 is straight up devil tier, and if you've watched this season, you know exactly why. This is Dexter at his absolute worst, and the consequences are catastrophic. The Trinity Killer storyline is incredible television, but it also showcases how Dexter's selfishness and obsession lead to the most tragic outcome possible. The entire season is Dexter making terrible decision after terrible decision because he's fascinated by Trinity. He has multiple opportunities to stop Arthur Mitchell, to save lives, to do the right thing. Instead, he keeps Trinity alive because he wants to learn from him, because he's curious about how Trinity maintains a family while being a serial killer. That curiosity costs lives. Every person Trinity kills after Dexter first has a chance to stop him is blood on Dexter's hands. But the real reason this is devil tier is Rita. Dexter's obsession and negligence directly lead to Rita's murder. He got so wrapped up in his own interests that he failed to protect the innocent person closest to him. The woman who loved him, who accepted him, who built a life with him, dies because Dexter couldn't prioritize properly. That's not anti-hero behavior, that's villain behavior. Trinity himself is a monster, but Dexter enabled him. The whole season shows Dexter prioritizing his dark passenger and his curiosity over human lives, including those of his own family. You can't come back from that morally. Devil tier, absolutely. And it's probably the most devastating season because of how far Dexter falls. Season 5 gets a level 4 rating, which is high on the evil scale but not quite devil tier. This season is complicated because Dexter is dealing with massive trauma from Rita's death, but the way he handles it shows some seriously dark tendencies. Dexter's pretty unhinged throughout this season. He's killing more recklessly, he's involving Lumen in his world, and while you could argue he's helping her get revenge, he's also clearly using her to fill the void Rita left. The relationship with Lumen is problematic on multiple levels. He's bringing someone else into his darkness instead of trying to be better. And he's doing it partly for selfish reasons, because he doesn't want to be alone. The kills this season are more emotionally driven and less about the code. Dexter's letting his feelings dictate his actions, which leads to sloppier work and more risks. He's endangering everyone around him, including his sister and his kids, because he can't process his grief in a healthy way. Jordan Chase and his crew deserve what they get, sure, but Dexter's methods and motivations are suspect throughout. What keeps this from devil tier is that there's still some restraint, and the targets are legitimately terrible people. But Dexter is clearly spiraling, making increasingly questionable choices, and dragging others down with him. Level 4 feels appropriate because he's operating at a high level of moral corruption, without quite reaching the catastrophic consequences of devil tier. Season 6 comes in at level 3, putting it in the middle range of Dexter's evil scale. This season is weird, because Dexter's trying to figure out if he can have faith, if he can be more than what he is. But he's also making some pretty dark choices along the way. The Doomsday Killer's storyline has Dexter questioning his nature and whether he's capable of genuine human connection and belief. That's actually a step towards something better, even if the execution is messy. However, Dexter's still manipulating everyone around him, still lying constantly, and still killing people in ways that are increasingly about his own needs rather than justice. Brother Sam's death is a pivotal moment that could have changed Dexter's trajectory, but he ultimately rejects that path. He chooses darkness over redemption, which is telling about where he is morally. The kills this season are a mix of justified and questionable, and Dexter's relationship with his sister starts getting inappropriate in ways that are uncomfortable and show his lack of normal emotional boundaries. Level 3 works here because Dexter's not at his absolute worst, but he's definitely not trying to be better in any meaningful way. He flirts with the idea of change, but ultimately retreats to familiar patterns. It's middle-tier evil because there's awareness without real growth. Season 7 is the other devil tier season, and man does Dexter earn it. Deborah finding out about Dexter's secret is the catalyst for everything falling apart, and Dexter handles it in the worst possible ways. What makes this devil tier is how Dexter destroys Deborah psychologically and morally. His sister, who dedicated her life to being good and upholding the law, gets dragged into his darkness completely. He manipulates her into helping him, into covering for him, into becoming complicit in murder. Watching Deborah's moral decay throughout this season is heartbreaking, and it's entirely Dexter's fault. LaGuerta's death is the final straw. She's a cop doing her job, trying to solve murders, and she ends up dead because Dexter and Deborah choose to protect themselves. Deborah, who was a good person, pulls the trigger to save her brother. That's how far Dexter's corruption spreads. He doesn't just kill people himself anymore, he turns the people who love him into killers too. He's choosing a murderer as a partner, someone who shares his darkness rather than someone who might make him better. Every choice this season prioritizes Dexter's wants over other people's lives and well-being. Devil tier, because the damage he causes to everyone around him, especially Deborah, is irreparable. Season 8 wraps things up with a level 4 rating. Dexter's still making terrible choices, but there's at least some self-awareness about how destructive he is. The problem is that awareness comes way too late. Dexter's relationship with Hannah continues, He's putting his son in danger, and he's making increasingly desperate choices as everything collapses around him. Deborah's downward spiral continues, and again, that's on Dexter. The Saxon storyline shows Dexter being reckless and emotional, breaking his own rules repeatedly. The ending, whatever you think of it quality-wise, shows Dexter finally recognizing that he destroys everyone he gets close to. The problem is he's already ruined multiple lives by the time he figures this out. Deborah's death is the culmination of seasons of Dexter's selfishness catching up to him. He finally does the right thing by leaving Harrison with Hannah and removing himself from their lives, but it's after causing immeasurable damage. Level 4. Because while Dexter shows some growth and self-awareness, the body count of ruined lives is staggering. He's operating at a high level of evil throughout, just barely avoiding devil tier because there's at least acknowledgement of his toxicity, even if it comes too late to matter. So that's the breakdown. Dexter's evil levels fluctuate throughout the series, but the general trajectory is downward. He starts as an anti-hero we can root for, and ends as someone who's destroyed basically everyone who ever cared about him. The devil tier seasons stand out, because that's when innocent people die specifically because of Dexter's selfishness, not just his compulsion to kill. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree with these rankings? Which season do you think Dexter was at his worst? Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.